well, we're going to move on to one of our favorite guests here is Jennifer. She's going to come up and give us an update on what's going on with the Moms for Liberty. Okay, it's not the Mothers for Liberty, the Moms for Liberty, and she's also on the school board. So we've got a great start there. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Jason.
You got that. There you go.
Good evening, I'm Jennifer Grinager. I'm a resident in Templeton, and I started the first chapter of Moms for Liberty in California. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Moms for Liberty. So a few of you have raised your hand, that's great. So I want to make sure you hear about it from me because there's a lot of misinformation out there, shocker, right? Moms for Liberty was started by two moms in Florida. Both of them were school board members and kind of saw behind the education curtain what was really going on and saw that we were needing some help and that there was a lack of parent involvement in the schools, not because parents didn't want to be involved, but because school systems were keeping them out. And so they started Moms for Liberty. It's a national, nonprofit, nonpartisan, despite the fact that we keep getting touted as a far-right, conservative Nazi group, we're not. And even if we were far-right, we wouldn't be a Nazi terrorist group. So they're a nonpartisan group. We do have Democrats, independents, all parties in our group. It just so happens that, lo and behold, it seems as though fighting for parents' rights over the education and health of their kids seems to be a conservative idea. That's kind of a weird thought for me. You'd think that would be universal. And you wouldn't think it would be so difficult, right? I mean, this seems like common sense and pretty normal to want to be able to direct the education of your kids and be involved. So there's a few things that you keep hearing about in the news if you're hearing about Moms for Liberty, and that is one, that we're anti-gay, we're an LGBTQ hate group. That's not true. The other is that we're a book banning group, and that's also not true. So what's important for you to understand about this, and the reason I'm telling you is I'm sure you'll hear people talking about it amongst your friends or family members, and I'd like for you to be able to have some words to be able to say to correct it. It would be a huge help. Number one, about the LGBTQ hate group, we're not we have I guess I should back up a little bit. I was the chapter chair of our chapter here in San Luis County. I served for 2 years doing that role. It's a very organized organization. We have a board of directors and we have elections. And so currently the chapter chair here is Trisha Murray. And she is an openly gay person, so obviously we would not be an anti-gay hate group when we have gay members in our club. And so we are against our children being indoctrinated. We are for the innocence of our children. We are against them being sexualized, and that's what we're fighting for. We see that that's what's going on in our school system. Secondly, with the book banning, there's a big difference between banning a book, which is working to have it not published anymore and exterminated from use for everybody, versus curating a book, which is when you're at a library and the librarian, they all have a process they go through when they're deciding which books should be in their library, and particularly in a public school library, which is what we're talking about, not the city library or the county library. We're talking about at your kid's school library. There are books that are quite graphic sexually, complete with pictures on how to have anal sex, how to use a butt plug, and I'm sorry to be so lewd, but that's exactly what you need to know. When they say that we're trying to ban things like To Kill a Mockingbird, it's a complete and total lie. There's never been any movement towards Moms for Liberty trying to ban any books that are our classic books. This has to do with books that are over-sexualized, and they have no business in our school system whatsoever. And if people want to get those books for their kids, they can still get them because we're not banning them, we're curating them, okay? So we also, the last thing I'll say about Moms for Liberty for now is that the National Summit is at the end of this month, June 29th. It's in Philadelphia, and I'm going. And they just announced the beginning of this week, I think, that President Trump is going to be there speaking to our group. So we're very excited about that, and I was lucky enough, I purchased VIP tickets in advance, so I'm especially excited that I'll hopefully get to meet him up front in person and shake his hand. So we have 4 presidential candidates who will be there at the summit. Besides Trump, it also includes Ron DeSantis, Tim Scott, and Nikki Haley. And Dennis Prager will also be there as a speaker, so we have an amazing lineup. I'm very excited and proud that our group was able to get such wonderful speakers. So the next thing I wanted to talk with you all about, is there anybody here who lives in Templeton? Great. And even if you don't live in Templeton, it's important for you to know this and consider coming, because it's not just for Templeton School District. You'll learn things that will help you in your school district, whether you're in Atascadero or Paso or Creston or wherever it is that you are. So we're having a special board meeting on June 20th at 5:30 p.m. And the topic is transgender students using opposite gender locker rooms and bathroom facilities. And so this is great because it's a standalone topic. It's not a full agenda. And so we'll have the opportunity to spend as much time as we need discussing this topic and hopefully coming to some resolutions that work. So what I first hear from people usually when I talk about this is, well, is this really happening here? You know, especially in Templeton, you know, I'm quite shocked. We're such a small town and this is the North County after all. Well, I'm here to tell you it's not only here, it's pretty rampant. So in Templeton, I don't know how many students we have that are choosing to use the opposite gender locker room, but I know for certain of 4 girls using the boys' locker room in 7th grade, and at least 1 student at the high school who's transgender that's using the female bathroom there. So it's happening in all of our school districts. Paso Robles, Atascadero, everywhere, it's happening. It's already here. So if you think that it's only happening in the big cities, I'm sorry to tell you you're wrong, and we need as much help as we can get. So what we're not trying to do is to force anybody to change in a facility that they feel uncomfortable in, okay? And I understand this is a hard thing to consider. You know, we all probably wish that we could just go back to a time period where boys are in the boys and the girls are in the girls and the end of that discussion. But we're not going to be successful if we take that stance, primarily because we have a law in California, not a mandate, not a recommendation, an actual law that was passed by our legislature in 2014, that long ago. And that law is that they added gender identity as a protected class. Okay, so we're all used to gender, race, religion, disability, all being protected classes under our state laws. You can't discriminate. Well, now gender identity, even perceived gender identity, is added as a protected class. So I'll answer questions when we're finished, if you could just hold on. If a transgender student approaches their administration and says, I'm really uncomfortable using the facility of my biological sex, the school district can offer to them to use a single-use facility. But if that transgender student doesn't want to, and they insist upon using the facility of their choice, then the district is stuck. To force them to use a single-use facility would be considered discrimination under the law. So we've got to be creative. The law does not require us to force everybody else to be in the facility at the same time. And one legal point that I'd like to bring up that I think is pretty significant that hasn't really been tried in the courts, but it should, and I'm not an attorney, so let me preface that. This is just speaking from common sense, how I look at things, and I'm also not speaking as the board member here, I'm speaking as an individual citizen. Gender identity, or any of the protected classes under that law, is not meant to be one is more elevated than another. They're all equal. There's not supposed to be discrimination of any of them to any extent. So if you have a transgender student in the locker room and there's somebody who is Muslim or Jewish or Christian or Mormon, and they say, well, I'm really uncomfortable with this. This goes against my religious beliefs, and I have a strong faith and belief against disrobing in front of the opposite gender before marriage, and I'm being discriminated against because I'm being forced to go against my religious beliefs. The school district can then offer to them to change in a single-use facility. What we're seeing with kids these days, however, is when they're offered that, because this has happened already, even in Templeton, that child feels as though if they take that option, that they're going to get bullied. They're going to be seen by their peers as transphobic, which is like the kiss of death right now, and they're going to be singled out and made to feel as though they're not a nice person because they're not willing to go along with the narrative. So they're stuck, and we don't really have any other accommodation for them, and it's really unfair. So you also have to consider, we know that in any given population, there's a certain percentage of people that will have had sexual assaults in their past, and that includes children. We know that kids get molested. We know that there's a percentage of kids, whether it's been talked about yet or discovered for that child yet or not. And imagine that child being in a locker room and they're now face to face with someone of the opposite gender, and this is an extremely vulnerable position for them to be in. If they've never told even their parents that this has happened, do you think they're going to go to somebody at school and say, I was molested and so this is really hard for me and I can't handle this? Of course they're not going to do that. So we're creating just an unbearable, untenable, unsafe, completely ludicrous situation. The only idea I've been able to come up with so far, and I hope that many of you will have solutions that you can bring to me as well, is that number one, we need to make parents fully aware of that it's happening. The transparency needs to be there. And so we accomplish that by sending a letter to every parent at the beginning of every school year, informing them of the law, just as I did for you tonight, and giving them a checkoff box form of solutions or options that they can send back to the district. If this situation is occurring in my child's class, then perhaps one of the options can be my child doesn't change out for PE then. Or perhaps the option is my child will be in a single-use facility, and that way it's the parent making the option for them. Hopefully it'll take away some of this stigma that kids are having to deal with. And if we have enough parents that are choosing that for their child, which I'm sure would be a majority, then they're gonna not be able to have PE on time because there's gonna be such a huge amount of kids choosing to change in a single-use facility that they're not gonna be able to get to PE on time, and the school's gonna have to come up with a better solution. So I'll leave it at that, and I'm June 20th at 5:30 is when this meeting is, and I hope all of you can be there. We need people to speak from just not a irrational. We don't want people coming up there and screaming about how wrong this is, and we just want transgender people to go away. It's not going to help. But if you can speak from a place of we want to come up with solutions and we want it to be working within the law, then I think we're going to be able to get the school board to listen and to act. Sir, you have a question?
Okay, we'll go ahead and take questions now.
Yeah.
She's a take charge kind of lady.
Thanks. In the first place, thanks for coming. I actually really applaud your courage. What I want to know is, have you or any of the other Moms for Liberty been approached by an investigator from the Department of Justice, particularly the FBI, who have already declared people who appear at board meetings domestic terrorists, guilty of conspiracy? Do you know of anybody?
I do.
And so tell us about what the FBI has done.
Well, it wasn't here in our state, and I can't remember which state it was in. I'm thinking it was somewhere on the East Coast, There was a mom that simply came to the school board to advocate for her child, and all of a sudden, like a week or so later, the FBI showed up on her doorstep while she was literally making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for her kids. So nothing ended up happening, but it was surely intimidating for her and should have never happened. So when you hear about that in the news and some people are saying this is all a conspiracy theory, it's not a conspiracy theory, it is true.
The FBI is a threat.
Yes.
Quickie, where is the meeting going to be located?
We don't know that yet. So they're anticipating, rightfully so, that our tiny little district office where we usually have our board meetings is not going to be a large enough space. And so it will either be at the high school new cafeteria, or there's a multi-purpose room that is shared with Templeton Elementary and Templeton Middle School. Will most likely be there. But they will post it 3 days in advance, 72 hours in advance, and on the district website. And I'll make sure Jason has the information. Maybe he can send it all out to you guys, but they'll announce it then.
Excuse me, Jason. What about going to TCSD and using their auxiliary office? Services District, Templeton Services District.
I don't even think that's large enough. Right, that's not large enough. It's the multi-purpose room at the elementary and middle school is much larger. Yeah, that would be more, I think I'm expecting a very large crowd.
Okay, with options, could you define single-use facility?
Yes, a single-use facility would be one where there's one toilet and one sink inside and a door that can lock, that only one person at a time goes in. And as far as bathrooms go, the bathroom use, the idea that I think seems to would work the best would be to lock the bathrooms during class time, and a student who needs to use the bathroom would need to get a key from their teacher and take one other trusted person with them for safety, because there's other issues going on in our bathrooms besides transgender use. Okay, we have gang issues, drug issues, vaping, all kinds of things going on. Kids beating each other up in the bathroom. So if we had one student with a trusted friend going one at a time with a key where they could lock the door and they were the only ones in there, I think that would help. During lunch and recess times, of course, that's not going to work because you have a lot more people wanting to use the bathroom at the same time. But if we had monitors outside of the bathroom that was keeping an ear open and kind of keep them watch as to who's coming in and out and paying attention, I think that would help as well. And we may need parent and grandparent volunteers for that.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Jennifer.
Yeah, thank you.